The first mistake the Galactic Council made was assuming that humanity's decision to send a single diplomat was a sign of arrogance or worse, weakness. From the observation gallery carved into the upper curve of the vast chamber, Ambassador Krill of the Nexian Empire watched silently as the human transport vessel approached. His compound eyes, capable of tracking multiple visual angles simultaneously, blinked in unison. As a career diplomat, he'd observed hundreds of tense sessions in this chamber, but something about this one felt different. There was a quietness in the air, a tension beneath the gleaming surface of formalities, something primal. The Grand Council chamber was meant to impress and intimidate. Carved from a single massive asteroid of pure rhodium, enhanced with embedded quantum crystalline structures that shimmered under 3 artificial suns, the chamber was a marvel of design and psychological warfare. 200 circular galleries rose in perfect harmony toward a ceiling so high it disappeared into engineered darkness. Representatives from over 10,000 species filled those tiers, some humanoid, others gaseous, crystalline, gelatinous, or cybernetic. The chamber buzzed with the constant hum of translator drones, creating an ambient sound not unlike the sacred prayer halls on Krill's homeworld, Nexia Prime. It was into this calculated display of galactic unity and authority that humanity had chosen to insert one man, just one. "Look at them," Grand Counselor Daxter muttered aloud from the central platform, crystalline limbs twitching in disdain as he gestured toward the slowly descending transport. Sending a single human diplomat to the Grand Council. The arrogance. Krill said nothing. His sensory membranes fluttered with mild unease. Humans were still a relatively young addition to the Galactic Assembly, barely 2 centuries into their interstellar age, and yet they'd proven unpredictable, fiercely adaptable, recklessly brave, irritatingly clever. But this was bold even for them. Ambassador Krill buzzed a familiar voice beside him. Chancellor Vex of the Polari drifted closer, their bioluminescent skin shifting in soft pulses of violet and green emotions Krill recognized as concern and curiosity. "Your assessment of this human situation?" Vex asked softly. Krill considered his answer carefully. "They've chosen their representative well," he said. "Marcus Steele. I've reviewed his record. It's interesting." "Interesting?" Vex's light patterns flickered faster. "To elaborate, every mission he's led has been successful, remarkably so," Krill replied. "But the records themselves there are gaps. Missions classified without explanation, debriefings missing. Anomalies in field reports. It feels incomplete. Intentionally so." A soft hum echoed as the chamber's primary entry portal began its ceremonial opening. All eyes turned toward the sound. The human transport had docked, and then he stepped inside. Marcus Steele, alone. For a species that the Council often dismissed as barely post-industrial savages with more muscle than diplomacy, Marcus Steele made an immediate impression. He was tall, even by human standards, his frame wrapped in a flawlessly tailored black suit that seemed to absorb the ambient light. His posture was precise, deliberate, every movement calculated. There was no hesitation, no sign of uncertainty. Krill's compound eyes narrowed, tracking the man's gait. Something about the way he moved triggered old instincts. There was too much control. It wasn't just confidence, it was comfort. Like a predator entering familiar terrain. The human's eyes swept the chamber, gray and unreadable. Cold as space dust, not hostile, not nervous, just watching. Protocol dictated that each planetary delegation send at least 3 representatives for full council sessions. It was written, well known. The rules were the rules. Yet here he stood alone. Protocol dictates a minimum of 3 representatives. And it is? Daxter sneered from the dais. Surely Earth received the regulations packet? Steele didn't miss a beat. Earth received all relevant documentation, Counselor, he said smoothly, his voice carrying clearly across the chamber. I speak with the full authority of my government. There was a pause, then someone from the upper gallery scoffed. Typical human arrogance. Krill felt a ripple in the air, a collective wave of subtle judgment, disapproval, dismissal. The humans were, once again, acting out of turn. But something else caught his attention, something deeply concerning. Where most species, when standing before the full council, displayed obvious signs of stress, excess glandular emissions, limb trembling, eye dilation, Marcus Steele showed none of it. Not even the faintest twitch. His breathing was slow, steady. His hands rested clasped behind his back in a posture that looked casual but was far too precise. 2. Rehearsed. Steele wasn't intimidated. He wasn't even trying to pretend to be. If anything, he looked like a man evaluating a room full of obstacles, not peers. Krill felt a prickle run down his spine equivalent. This was wrong. This human, another delegate said from behind a filtered mask, comes from a warmongering species that expands recklessly. They are a threat to stability, Counselor High Chancellor Vex interjected diplomatically, their tones now glowing with faint alarm. Earth's military expansion remains within the limits of the Galactic Accords. It does, Steele interrupted, the faintest edge in his voice. As you are all well aware. Just as this theatric display of disapproval violates at least 16 diplomatic protocols, the chamber erupted into discontent. Voices layered over voices, languages twisted through translator drones into noise. Krill's membranes fluttered. This was escalating far too fast. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Security Chief Raynamerk signal her team. Subtle gestures, non-verbal. 6 of her elite guards began to move into new positions, standard procedure during a heated session, sure. But something about their movement was wrong, too deliberate, too symmetrical. Coordinated like a strike formation. Why would they do that? Why would they prepare for a fight? With a diplomat? Krill watched Steele again, more carefully this time. Still calm, still unmoving, but his eyes, those gray, watchful eyes, were tracking everything. Each guard's position, every entrance, every shift in the room's power structure. His body barely moved, but Krill noticed the subtle changes. A slight shift of weight to one foot, the minute tension in his shoulders, the almost imperceptible flare of his nostrils as he breathed in the room's chemical atmosphere. The signs were there. Krill had seen apex predators move like that. On his homeworld, they were rare and dangerous, camouflaged, patient, and terrifying when provoked. This man, this Marcus Steele, moved the same way, and yet the Council didn't see it, or worse, they didn't care. Perhaps they believed that, even if he was a threat, he was just one man, just one human. What could one human do? Krill shivered, his instincts screaming. They'd made a mistake. Not just in misjudging the human delegation's representation, not just in provoking someone who clearly wasn't intimidated. They had misread the entire situation. The tension in the chamber thickened as Daxter stepped forward again, this time his crystalline limbs reflecting jagged shards of light, signaling rising aggression. The humans have established 37 new military outposts in the past solar cycle, he declared, each capable of supporting a battle fleet. This is not diplomacy. This is a prelude to conquest. Steele's voice cut through the rising storm. Defensive installations, he corrected, calm and steady. Positioned to protect our mining operations in colony worlds. Or would the Council prefer we leave our citizens undefended? More murmurs, more judgment, more scorn. Krill didn't join them. His attention never left Steele. There was something else in that man's posture now, a coiled energy. Not overt, not theatrical, just waiting. He wasn't here as a symbolic gesture. He wasn't here to play at politics. Marcus Steele was a man with a mission, and every cell in Krill's body screamed that mission had contingencies. Deadly ones. And still, the Council postured and debated and signaled guards. Still, they underestimated him. Still, they didn't see it, but Krill did. You saw the way Steele's eyes flicked to the ceiling-mounted security turrets. How he subtly adjusted his position to give himself access to multiple escape routes. How he used each moment of political theater to assess, to calculate, to prepare. Steele was here to talk, yes, but he was ready. And Krill, a seasoned diplomat of 5 centuries, had the horrible realization that his council was about to push the wrong man at the wrong time. They didn't know who he really was. They didn't want to know, but soon they would, and by then it might be too late. The moment the chamber turned against him, Marcus Steele didn't flinch. The situation had been teetering for several minutes. Subtle signs of aggression were rising, rippling through the Council's tiers like storm waves gathering force. At first, it was just accusations, sharp-edged words, wrapped in diplomatic phrasing. But now, the language was hardening. Tempers flared. Security personnel shifted into tactical stances. The Council was no longer posturing. They were preparing to strike. Ambassador Krill, high above in his designated alve, knew exactly what was happening. He'd been in diplomatic service long enough to recognize the prelude to violence regardless of the species or the form it took. And yet, Marcus Steele stood perfectly still, alone, unarmed, and surrounded. The only human in a chamber of 10,000 species. The only pirates in that sector, Counselor Daxter thundered, his crystalline form fracturing light in jagged pulses, are human privateers. We have proof of your government's direct involvement in destabilizing that region. Steele didn't blink. His expression remained cool, composed. Unsubstantiated accusations, he replied, his voice calm but firm. But if we're discussing proof, perhaps we should examine the recent weapon shipments from your territory to the Crimson Blade Collective. The words landed like a bomb. A hush swept through the chamber so suddenly that even the background hum of translator drones seemed to fade. Ambassador Krill's membranes tingled. That information was classified at the highest levels. Leaking, it would mean death in some governments. The Crimson Blade Collective was a violent, rogue faction. Ties to them were political poison. The silence didn't last. How dare you, Daxter growled, his form pulsing with chromatic rage. Security, detain this human immediately. He's a spy, Ambassador Krill's breath caught. This was it, the trigger. The moment diplomacy died and something else took its place. Security Chief Raina Merk, standing at the base of the chamber with her squad of elite guards, hesitated only a heartbeat before moving. She raised her neural stunner, aimed it at Steele's chest, and fired. Steele moved. It wasn't movement, not in the way Krill understood it. It was flow. One moment, Steele was standing still. The next, the stunner was tumbling through the air, disarmed with a blur of motion so quick that Krill's compound eyes almost missed it. 3 guards charged in, elite, trained, armored, armed. They never stood a chance. Steele's first strike shorted out the power core on the lead guard's exo-armor. Sparks flew as the suit collapsed under its own weight, leaving its occupant helpless on the floor. The second guard rose into the air suddenly, his anti-grav belt hacked with a device Steele had palmed so quickly Krill hadn't even seen it come out. The third rushed in from the side. He never made it. Steele intercepted him mid-charge, redirected the momentum, and sent the guard crashing to the floor. Bones cracked. Limbs bent at unnatural angles. Krill wasn't the only one stunned into silence. Every species in the chamber was frozen in disbelief. Steele straightened his cuffs, as if brushing lint off his jacket. His breathing hadn't changed. Not a single drop of sweat touched his brow. "This is an outrage," Daxter howled. "You dare assault Council security?" Steele's reply was as cold as deep space. "Technically, your security assaulted a diplomatic representative protected under Article 7 of the Galactic Accords, an act that, by most interpretations, qualifies as a declaration of war." Krill's sensory membranes trembled. This wasn't just a diplomatic incident anymore. This was a crisis, a turning point. More guards poured into the chamber from upper galleries. Krill counted them reflexively 12, no 20, all armed, all converging on Steele's position, but Steele was already watching them. He didn't move, not yet. He just shifted his weight, ever so slightly, scanning entry points, calculating angles. How did a diplomat move like that? "High Chancellor!" Merk shouted, clutching her shoulder dislocated clearly. "This human is clearly dangerous." The human, Steele cut in, is still waiting to begin the agenda discussions. Unless, of course, there are more illegal detention attempts planned. Then it hit Krill. The gaps in Steele's diplomatic records, the inconsistencies, the classified redactions. He looked again, not at Steele's posture, but at the deliberate way he stood, balanced across the balls of his feet, like a martial artist ready to strike. Every muscle ready, every step intentional. Krill's mouth went dry. He opened a channel to the chamber's command AI re-verify his credentials, Krill ordered. Use the full database. Don't stop at the diplomatic cover. A moment later, a junior security officer's voice came over the chamber intercom, shaking. Marcus Steele. Former commander, Human Special Operations, codename Gods Preserve Us, Baba Yaga. The name hit the chamber like a thunderclap. Daxter visibly recoiled. Even Merk, as tough and no-nonsense as she was, took an unconscious step back. Krill swallowed hard. He remembered the reports, the legend of New Damascus. A fortress world held by a coalition of warlords. Dozens of failed sieges. Entire fleets destroyed. Then, One night, silence. No explosions, no transmissions, just silence. When rescue forces arrived, they found over 300 elite guards dead, command structures annihilated, defenses bypassed with surgical precision. On the command screen, a single message. Consider this a diplomatic warning. And now that same operative stood calmly before the council in a tailored suit, correcting their grammar while brushing off an assassination attempt. "Shall we return to the agenda?" Steele asked, as if nothing had happened. The room reeled with panic, but Daxter was too proud, too angry, too stupid. "Kill him," he screamed. "Kill the human before he kills us all." Red lights bathed the chamber. Emergency protocols engaged. Guards dozens flooded in. Steele's eyes flashed. "Last chance," he said quietly, removing his jacket with deliberate slowness. "Stand down, and we can settle this through diplomacy." They didn't stand down. The first wave hit him from 3 directions. Steele didn't fight back like a soldier. He moved like a phantom fluid, unstoppable, mercilessly efficient. One guard fired a neural stunner, missed, and dropped 2 of his own comrades as Steele pivoted out of the line of fire. Another swung a baton. Steele caught the wrist mid-swing and redirected the force into a throw that launched the attacker into a pillar. A third tried to flank him. Steele used the chamber wall as leverage to springboard into a spinning takedown that ended with the attacker unconscious on the floor. Ambassador Krill watched, spellbound. It wasn't a battle, it was choreography, efficiency incarnate. Sonic weapons came next. Steele responded with a silver sphere that pulsed once, and every sonic emitter in the chamber overloaded and died. "Ants," Merc barked. "Plus quarters. Don't let him reach any equipment." Too late. Steele adapted instantly. His fighting style shifted, no longer evading, now intercepting, disarming, using the council chamber itself as a weapon. He pulled the support beam loose and used it as a staff, slammed a control panel cover into an attacker's chest, slid across the polished floor to trip 3 guards simultaneously. The gallery was chaos. Krill recorded every move. He couldn't help it. It was history happening in real time. Steele was a storm, an old ghost come to life. Members of the council fled for the exits, only to find the chamber locking down around them. Bulkheads slammed shut, lights flickered, security systems glitched. "Someone override the system," Daxter shouted, now visibly trembling. "We can't," a technician cried. "He's locked us out." Steele, now standing on the central dais, hadn't broken a sweat. He gazed around at the chamber calmly, silently, the way a wolf watches sheep that thought the fence would save them. "Your species is insane," someone whispered. "You're monsters." Steele smiled faintly. "Hardly, just well-trained." 30 years of experience doesn't hurt either. He intercepted a guard's punch, redirected it into another attacker, then vaulted over a fallen body onto a higher tier. 3 more guards dropped in quick succession, nerve clusters disabled with surgical precision. Krill couldn't look away. He understood now Steele wasn't just surviving. He was sending a message. "You tried to kill me. You failed. Now I hold the room." The words weren't spoken, but they didn't need to be. They were etched into every fallen guard, every sealed door, every flickering emergency light. Someone whimpered, "New Damascus." Steele paused. That name changed him. For a brief moment, his face shifted, tightened. Not in shame, but in memory. And maybe warning. "New Damascus," he repeated, voice low but audible across the chamber. That was a message, too. One some of you seem to have forgotten. He pulled out a device. The chamber's screens lit up. Footage from New Damascus. Not the combat, the aftermath. Children rescued, slaves freed, war criminals detained. Labs shut down. The truth exposed. "I went to New Damascus because diplomacy failed," Steele said softly. 17 formal protests. All ignored, so we sent one last visit. He turned slowly, taking in the silent, stunned faces. Some of you made the same mistake today, and yet he hadn't killed a single one of them. Not a guard, not a counselor, not even Merc, whose shoulder still hung limp. Steele's final blow wasn't with fists. It was restraint. Krill felt the lesson sink into the collective psyche of the council. This man, this diplomat, could have destroyed them, but he didn't, and that made him more terrifying than any weapon. For a long moment, silence ruled the Grand Council chamber. Not the polite, diplomatic kind, the uncomfortable kind. The kind of silence that stretches like a pause before an explosion, that tightens every nerve. It tells everyone in the room they've made a mistake, but it's too late to take it back. Ambassador Krill stood frozen in his observation alcove, his compound eyes locked on the human standing calmly at the center of the chaos. Marcus Steele hadn't moved in nearly a full minute. 43 guards lay scattered across the chamber. Some groaned, most didn't, but not one of them was dead. That detail mattered. It was the only thing giving anyone in that chamber the faintest hope that they might still salvage the situation. "Sir," came a nervous voice from the central control dais, "we've confirmed his military record. Marcus Steele, former commander, Human Special Operations, codename Baba Yaga." The final two words didn't echo in the traditional sense. They didn't need to. They settled over the chamber like a blanket of ice. Baba Yaga. The name didn't appear in most official records. Those who knew it pretended they didn't. Those who didn't were better off. But anyone who had survived a certain war, who had been near the New Damascus incident or had read the real briefings, the black files that only intelligence directors saw, knew exactly what the name meant. Krill felt his sensory membranes contract in reflexive fear. The ghost of New Damascus. The man who, according to unconfirmed reports, single-handedly neutralized a fortress world's entire command structure without a single energy weapon. No explosives, no drone support, no fleet, just him, a single operative. The reports had sounded like propaganda, impossible feats, myths designed to intimidate, until now. Krill's translator caught a whisper from the gallery above him. One of the older delegates, a seasoned diplomat from the Valeri system, had leaned to mutter to a colleague, unaware that Krill could still hear him. "I thought Baba Yaga was just a story." Apparently not. On the chamber floor, Counselor Daxter, who had just minutes ago shouted for Steele's execution, now stood behind two of his remaining guards, his crystalline form dimming rapidly. The anger had drained from him, replaced with unmistakable fear. "You! This can't be," he stammered. You're not military anymore." "You're a diplomat." Steele's gray eyes swept the chamber, landing briefly on Daxter. He adjusted his tie, the motion smooth and strangely clinical. "I am," he said, his voice deceptively calm. "I was appointed to the Diplomatic Corps 3 cycles ago. Fully credentialed, fully vetted." He let the silence stretch just long enough for the weight of his words to settle. "But that doesn't mean I forgot who I was before." Krill's translator struggled to keep up with the hushed murmurs now spreading across the galleries. Representatives who had once scoffed at humanity now leaned back in their seats, some gripping railings, others quietly activating personal shields or sending messages to their home governments. Steele's reputation was catching up to him, and so was the Council's mistake. High Chancellor Vex drifted forward from his neutral position near the back of the chamber. His bioluminescent patterns pulsed rapidly, panic mixed with regret. Krill knew that glow well. Vex was thinking about damage control, about treaties, about what this would mean for the political balance of the entire assembly. "I remember," Vex said quietly. "New Damascus. We thought the reports were exaggerated." The fortress was considered unbreakable. Krill remembered too. It had been one of the most secure installations in the known galaxy. Orbiting a volatile red giant, protected by planetary defense grids, orbital cannons, and surface-level kill zones, New Damascus had served as the crown jewel of the consortium's military strategy. The reports had been erratic. At 300 galactic standard, the fortress went dark. No warning, no energy surge, just gone. Comms blacked out. Internal systems scrambled. Automated distress signals triggered at exactly the same time across hundreds of nodes. When the relief fleet arrived hours later, they found the facility intact, untouched from orbit, but inside, the halls were silent. The corridors were lined with bodies. Not burned, not shredded, neutralized, quietly, surgically. Entire rooms of armed soldiers subdued without a sound, defense systems offline, internal cameras frozen, security logs erased or corrupted. And in the command center, one message displayed across every screen: "Consider this a diplomatic warning." Krill had read the after-action report. Not the public one, the real one. The message wasn't metaphor, it was a deliberate statement. One human had done what thousands of troops, dozens of fleets, and 100 bombardments couldn't, and they had sent him here. Steele turned away from the council now and moved toward the central display podium, drawing a small device from his suit pocket. It wasn't a weapon, at least not in the conventional sense. Just a diplomatic data pad. He tapped it once. The chamber's main screen lit up. Footage played grainy, black and white, but unmistakable. Krill recognized the layout instantly. New Damascus, interior corridors. Security footage recovered from partially restored nodes. The footage showed a shadow moving through the halls. Just a flicker of motion here and there. A black silhouette, no face, no weapons visible, just efficient, unrelenting movement. In one sequence, guards fell in complete silence two at once, their armored bodies collapsing without a sound. In another, a maintenance corridor deactivated its automated defense turrets mid-pulse. The shadow passed through as if invited. "We tried diplomacy first," Steele said as the footage looped. 17 formal complaints. Dozens of encrypted communiques. No response, so my government send me. He paused. One final diplomatic visit. The words were carefully chosen. Krill noticed that the room had grown colder, though the environmental systems hadn't changed. It was the silence. The awareness. Everyone in the chamber now understood they were standing on a precipice. They hadn't just underestimated a human diplomat. They had tried to detain the single most dangerous operative in human history, and he'd let them. Because he wanted them to. Chancellor Vex's light patterns dimmed to a slow, steady blue, a signal of surrender in Polari diplomatic language. "This was a demonstration," Vex said softly. Steele nodded. "A necessary one, unfortunately." From the far end of the chamber, Security Chief Merck stepped forward, nursing her shoulder. Her team, those who could still stand, followed at a distance, visibly shaken. She didn't look angry. She didn't look proud. Just tired. "You never intended to fight us," she said. "You were waiting for this moment." Steele didn't answer. He didn't have to. Krill finally understood the full scope of what had happened. Steele had known the council would react aggressively, had known the corrupt elements like Daxter would panic, that they would overreach, that they'd try to silence him, and that in doing so, they'd expose themselves. This wasn't just a show of force. It was a trap. And they had all walked into it willingly. Krill sent a private message to Chancellor Vex. No translator, just text. One line. "He baited us." And we took it. Vex's glow pulsed once in agreement. Daxter, now fully panicked, turned to flee. His guards tried to shield him, but it was too late. Steele raised one hand not to attack, but to signal, and a squad of neutral council enforcers moved to block the exit. "The council will hear the charges shortly," Steele said. "The weapon transfers, the falsified pirate attacks, the staged aggression. All of it. The evidence has been secured." Daxter's voice cracked. "This is a human manipulation." "A setup," Steele shrugged. "The falsified evidence was just bait. You didn't need to confess, but you did, in front of the full council. On record." Krill felt something shift deep within him. Not fear, not admiration, respect. Marcus Steele hadn't just walked into the most powerful political body in the galaxy. He had dismantled a corruption network, exposed a criminal conspiracy, neutralized an elite security force, and reminded everyone present that humanity didn't rise through violence. They rose because they were willing to hold back their violence until it was needed, and when it was, God help whoever stood in their way. Steele looked up to Krill's position now. Their eyes met across the expanse of the chamber. "You said earlier that something about me felt wrong," Steele said, his voice carrying. Krill nodded slowly. "Yes." Steele smiled faintly. "You were right." He gestured to the chamber around him, the still smoking consoles, the unconscious guards, the terrified counselors. "But it wasn't because I'm dangerous," he said. "It's because you all assumed I wouldn't be." He paused, letting that sink in. "You assumed humanity sent a diplomat because we were weak, or foolish, or arrogant." He straightened his tie again, a nervous habit, or maybe just muscle memory from decades of wearing suits that had to be ready for war. "But maybe," he said softly, "we sent a diplomat because that's the most dangerous thing we could have done." Krill didn't breathe for several seconds, because deep down he knew it was true. The Grand Council would never see humanity the same way again. The silence that followed Marcus Steele's statement was heavier than any explosion. It wasn't just the quiet that settled across the Grand Council chamber, it was the dawning realization. Every counselor, every ambassador, every guard who remained conscious now understood what had just happened. This hadn't been an accident. It wasn't a diplomatic blunder or a rogue outburst of violence. This was deliberate. Every word Steele had spoken, every moment of restraint, all of it was part of a strategy. Not just to survive, but to expose. Ambassador Krill stood motionless in his observation alcove, his compound eyes wide. His neural translator buzzed softly in his ears, struggling to process the overlapping chatter of counselors whispering to each other in panic. But Krill wasn't listening to them. He was watching Steele. Steele had returned to the center of the chamber, straightening the cuffs of his suit once more. A fresh tear in his left sleeve revealed part of the dense weave of the hidden combat fabric underneath subtle armor designed to look like standard diplomatic wear. No one had noticed it before, but still didn't, but Krill did. The human wasn't just prepared for an attack, he expected one, and he had used it masterfully. Security Chief Raina Merck, still wincing from her dislocated shoulder, approached the main control console. Her expression was unreadable anger perhaps, but not at Steele. No, this anger was inward. At herself, at how easily they'd been manipulated. "We've run the scans," one of her sub-commanders reported. "The guards who attacked ours, mine, they weren't in control." "What?" Merck turned sharply. "What do you mean?" The young officer hesitated. "Neural command overrides, not standard security protocols. These were wet work combat routines. Full kill orders embedded in their implants, executed remotely." The color drained from Merck's face. Even her scaled skin shifted into a dull, sickly gray blue. She turned toward Daxter, who now stood boxed in by real council enforcers, not the compromised guards from earlier. "You killed protocols into my people's minds," she hissed, her voice low, furious. Daxter, cornered and shaking, backed into the safety of his remaining loyalist. His crystalline form no longer sparkled with arrogance. It pulsed erratically, patterns scrambled by fear. "He found evidence," Daxter snapped, pointing a shaking limb toward Steele. "He uncovered our deals with the Crimson Blade Collective, the weapon transfers, the data leaks. If we didn't act, he was going to expose us." Steele's voice cut through the rising panic. Calm, precise. "Like always. You mean the evidence I planted?" he said, hands folded neatly behind his back. "Falsified records. Dummy transmission logs. Easily disproved by any halfway competent forensic team." Krill blinked slowly. "What?" Daxter froze. His crystalline body rippled with sudden confusion. What are you talking about?" Steele stepped forward, just once, enough to remind everyone he was still in control. "I created those files," he said, "doctored them, leaked them where I knew you'd find them. All it took was one whisper, one planted suggestion that I discovered your secrets, and you panicked. Just like I knew you would." The chamber reeled. Krill's mouth went dry. Steele hadn't uncovered a conspiracy. He had manufactured one to bait the real one into revealing itself. "You set us up," Daxter whispered. Steele's expression didn't change. "You set yourself up," he replied. Krill's brain raced. It was too elegant, too calculated. Daxter had panicked because he believed the false evidence was real. He activated kill orders on his own guards that had been clean, loyal, and now unknowingly turned into assassins. In doing so, Daxter revealed the very thing Steele wanted the Council to see, that there were factions among them willing to override free will to protect their secrets. That was the real crime. The assassinations, the weapon deals. Terrible, yes, but manipulating sentient beings into committing murder without their consent? That would fracture the Council's moral authority beyond repair. Security Chief Merck confirmed it seconds later. "These protocols weren't just embedded in my team's neural chips," she said, reviewing the results. "They were executed without consent. Triggered from a secondary system, someone hardwired override codes into my command net. These guards were used." She turned on Daxter, fury etched into every word. "You hijacked my people's minds." Daxter's form dimmed further. You don't understand. We had to." "You would've." Steele raised one hand, calmly, almost gently. No more lies. The full council was locked in now. No one moved. No one whispered. The silence had shifted again from shock to clarity. They saw Daxter for what he was, and they saw Steele for what he had become. Not a brute, not a killer, a scalpel, a diplomat who used truth like a weapon and fear like a shield. Chancellor Vex floated forward slowly, his bioluminescence now glowing with something Krill hadn't seen in cycles reverence. "You set this in motion from the beginning," Vex said quietly. "You predicted how far they'd go. You gave them the rope, and they chose to hang themselves." Steele didn't smile. "Not this time. I hoped they wouldn't," he said, but history said otherwise. Krill stepped forward from the observation gallery, the first ambassador brave enough to speak again. "You knew the council might react violently," he said. "You planned for that." Steele nodded. "Yes, you let them attack you." "I let them try." Krill felt a chill ripple through him. He knew what this meant now. The real operation had started the moment Steele walked into the chamber alone. Everything after that had been a trigger, a prompt, a test, and the council had failed it. Daxter made one last desperate plea. "This is a human plot. You manipulated us. You can't prove anything." Steele tilted his head slightly, like a man reluctantly finishing a task. "I don't have to prove anything," he said. "You did it for me." He turned to the enforcers, detain him, and his co-conspirators. No hesitation. Dozens of neutral security personnel moved in. Daxter screamed, his voice fracturing into crystalline static, but no one listened. His guards dropped their weapons before they could be questioned. 2 other council members followed quietly, shamefully. Krill recognized their names. They'd been on war crime watch lists before, but there had never been enough to convict them. Now there would be. As they were led away, Krill watched Steele, his posture relaxed, not victorious, just resolved. "You could have killed them all," Krill said softly, stepping down to meet him face to face. "At New Damascus you did." Steele didn't flinch, but there was something behind his eyes now, a weight, a history. "At New Damascus," he said, "they gave me no choice." He looked around at the chamber, at the still shocked counselors, the disabled systems, the damaged panels, the guards tending to each other. Today was about preventing another New Damascus. The words landed like a prayer. And they stuck. Krill understood then that Steele's restraint wasn't just strategy, it was philosophy, it was policy. He'd held back because he could. Because someone needed to show the galaxy that power wasn't defined by what you were willing to destroy, but what you were willing to endure to protect what mattered. It wasn't just about exposing corruption. It was about proving humanity's most dangerous trait wasn't rage or cunning. It was mercy, and that made them truly terrifying. Chancellor Vex turned back toward the chamber. "Marcus Steele," he said formally, "Council owes you an apology, and, I think, a great deal more." Steele gave a small nod. "I'm not here for apologies." "Then why are you here?" Krill asked. Steele's gray eyes lifted. "To remind the galaxy that diplomacy isn't weakness," he paused. "But also to remind them that ignoring diplomacy has consequences." End of idea 4, 2,000 words total. Let me know when you're ready for idea 5, and I'll carry forward the same tone and intensity into the next part. Absolutely. Below is a 2,000-word realistic American English rewrite for idea 5, based on the YouTube story and your summary. This section centers on the deeper message Marcus Steele delivers to the Galactic Council. Humanity's strength doesn't come from force, but from restraint, and that their terrifying power lies in what they choose not to do. The tone remains cinematic, grounded, and emotionally serious in the H5 genre style. Idea 5. The message behind the power, humanity's strength and restraint. 3 days had passed since Marcus Steele stood alone in the heart of the Grand Council chamber and exposed a nest of corruption. 3 days since 43 guards had been rendered unconscious or incapacitated without a single casualty. 3 days since the Council had witnessed firsthand what a human could do, what a single human chose not to do. And yet, even as the chamber was scrubbed clean, as technicians worked around the clock to repair damaged security consoles and replace scorched sections of the marble-like floor, the echoes of that day still hung in the air. They weren't sounds. They weren't visuals. They were lessons. Ambassador Krill returned to the chamber reluctantly. He had never feared the council hall before, not in all his years of service. Not in the tense pre-war summits between the Aslar Coalition and the Varn Dominion. Not during the volatile trade disputes of the 9th expansion era, but now, every footstep on the polished floor carried weight, because now everyone knew. Humans didn't bluff, and worse, humans didn't have to. Steel was already waiting when Krill arrived, standing quietly in the far corner of the main observation lounge, watching the artificial suns descend over the station's outer edge. View was stunning, but Krill barely noticed it. His eyes were on the man, the ghost who had changed the shape of intergalactic diplomacy with nothing but presence, planning, and precision. "You're early," Steel said without turning. Krill paused. "Habit of mine. Good habit," Steel said. "The early ones tend to survive." The comment could have been a joke. Could have been a veiled threat. Krill wasn't sure anymore. With Marcus Steel, everything had layers. "I've been thinking about what you said," Krill admitted, stepping closer. "That this was about avoiding another new Damascus." Steel nodded. "It was. But you let them strike first. You let them try to kill you. You disabled systems, shut down bulkheads. You walked into that room already knowing what would happen." Steel finally turned to face him. "Not quite. I walked into that room ready for what might happen. There's a difference." Krill tilted his head. "Is there?" Steel gestured to the horizon, to the manufactured sky outside. "What would have happened if I brought a fleet? If I'd led with threats? If I'd stood up there and said humans are tired of your corruption, and waved around sanctions? You'd be ignored," Krill said instantly. Steel smirked faintly. "Exactly. They would have seen it as posturing. Another species trying to punch above its weight," Krill exhaled. "So instead you reminded them what humans are capable of?" Steel shook his head. "No," he said. "I reminded them what we choose not to do." That gave Krill pause. He considered those words, weighing their weight. "You were holding back the entire time," he said finally. Steel nodded. "You noticed." Krill thought of the disabled guards, of the crushed suits of armor, of the missing kill shots that never came. "You could have killed all of them." "I've done worse," Steel said quietly. The words weren't a boast. They weren't angry. They were tired. Like a soldier carrying memories no one else wanted to understand. "That's what scared everyone," Krill said. "Not the violence, the restraint, the fact that you didn't do more." Steel looked away. "People always assume the most dangerous person in the room is the one yelling," he said. "The one throwing punches, the one drawing weapons. But the most dangerous person is usually the one who doesn't have to say anything." Krill was silent. Steel continued. "Humans have a long history of war. We were fighting each other before we had electricity. We turned every element of our biology into tools for survival, adrenaline, fear, focus. But at some point we learned that real strength wasn't in how much damage we could do." He turned back to Krill, his expression unreadable. "It was in how much we could stop ourselves from doing." Krill nodded slowly. "I think the Council is starting to understand that." Steel gave a quiet laugh. "Some of them. The rest are updating their security systems and praying we never send another diplomat." The words might have sounded smug coming from anyone else. But from Steel, they came with a burden. "You don't enjoy this," Krill said suddenly. "Any of it?" Steel didn't answer right away. "No," he said at last. "I enjoy peace. I just know how fragile it is." He tapped the glass with his fingertip, watching a ripple of light bend across the manufactured starfield. "They talk about humans like we're monsters, brutes, uncontrolled anomalies. But everything I did in that chamber, the force, the strategy, the planning, it wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about showing off. It was about control." Krill watched him closely. "And what happens now?" he asked. "To you? To the Council?" Steel leaned back slightly, arms crossed. "Now the Council rebuilds. It removes the rot, strengthens the walls. It learns to listen again. It takes diplomacy seriously, not just when it's convenient, but when it's necessary." Krill nodded. "And you?" Steel hesitated. "I go to the next meeting," he said. "Shake the next hand. Listen to the next lie. Wait for the next threat. Hope I never have to do what I did here again." Krill studied him. "Is that why your government sent you?" "Not just to stop the corruption, but to scare the galaxy into remembering why diplomacy matters." Steel smiled, just a little. "Sometimes the best way to remind people of peace is to let them get close to war." Krill looked out at the stars. "They'll fear us now," Steel corrected him. "They'll fear what happens when they stop respecting us." There was a distinction, and it mattered. Across the galaxy, already the ripples had begun. Trade routes once contested suddenly opened. Pirate attacks ceased in sectors where human patrols operated. Border disputes shifted tone, now laced with caution. No one wanted to be the next Daxer. No one wanted to test what would happen if humanity's restraint finally ran out. But more importantly, Krill realized, no one wanted to miss the message. Humans weren't dangerous because they loved war. They were dangerous because they understood war and still chose diplomacy first. Krill stood beside the human in silence for several minutes, both of them watching the distant artificial stars flare and dim. "Marcus," Krill said at last, his voice unusually soft, "the galaxy may never look at your species the same way again." Steele adjusted his tie. That was the point. They turned, walking away without ceremony. No guards, no fanfare. Just a man who had changed the fate of 1,000 species with a calm voice, steady hands, and the will to not strike first. As Steele disappeared into the lift, Krill finally understood what made humans so terrifying and why, in the years to come, every council chamber, every negotiation table, every whispered conversation about Earth would begin with the same quiet, reverent thought: what happens if we push them too far? And the answer would always be the same: let's never find out. The formal apology ceremony was quiet, reverent, even humble by Galactic Council standards. It had been scheduled 3 standard days after the incident. Same location, same chamber, same cold air tinged with ionized crystal dust. But the atmosphere had changed. So had the people. The tall archways, carved into rhodium stone, no longer loomed with the intimidation of power. They hung with the memory of one man's choice to spare them all. Dozens of species lined the galleries once again, though the tone was different now. Before, they had come to challenge the human representative. Now, they came to understand him, to observe, to document, to learn. Because what had happened in this chamber would be studied for generations to come, not as an act of aggression, but as a turning point in galactic diplomacy. Ambassador Marcus Steele stood in the center of the chamber once more, dressed in a new black suit identical to the last. Impeccable, clean, simple. No armor visible, no weapons. But now, everyone present knew better. He was the weapon. Chancellor Vex spoke first, his bioluminescent skin glowing in solemn, rhythmic patterns of official contrition. The Galactic Council extends its deepest and most sincere apologies to the human diplomatic corps, and to Ambassador Marcus Steele in particular, he declared. The actions taken against your person violated protocol, treaty, and ethics. Reparations have been calculated and will be transferred. All human military installations are henceforth acknowledged as legitimate defensive positions protected under the Interstellar Charter. Steele nodded once, nothing more. His face betrayed no emotion. Earth accepts the Council's apology, he replied, his voice steady and unshaken, and we look forward to continued peaceful relations. It was the way he said peaceful that made the room tense again. Not as a threat. As a reminder. The word hung in the air like the whisper of a drawn blade not yet swung, but within reach. Krill stood from his seat in the lower gallery. His species did not often offer personal observations at ceremonial functions, but protocol was already shattered. What was one more crack in the old ways? I would like to add a comment with the Council's permission, he said. Vex nodded. Krill stepped forward, his voice amplified gently by the chamber's central acoustics. We have witnessed something historic, he began. Not a battle, not a cup, but a choice. All eyes turned to him, he continued. We watched a single representative of a species many considered too young, too bold, too dangerous walk into our most sacred chamber alone and demonstrate that the true measure of power is restraint. He turned to Steele, not with fear, but with something that surprised even him: respect. Marcus Steele could have destroyed us. You all saw it. Many of you felt it, but he didn't, because humans, it turns out, don't lead with force. Krill looked back at the council. They lead with hope. A few counselors shifted in their seats. Others stared down at their notes or at the floor, but many dozens nodded quietly. Steele gave a small smile, faint, barely perceptible, but Krill saw it. And it mattered. After the ceremony, Krill found him alone in the garden gallery, away from the crowd. The artificial light played across the edges of the walls, soft and golden, simulating a sunset Earth diplomats had apparently requested years ago. At the time, the council had granted the request with thinly veiled amusement. Now, no one was laughing. You're still here, Krill said. Approaching. Steele turned, his hands folded behind his back. Didn't have a reason to leave. Not yet. Krill stood beside him, both of them watching the light dim. You've changed the council, Krill said. Steele nodded. That was the idea. But not just politically, Krill added. You've changed how they think, How they view humanity. Steele turned slightly, his expression neutral. And, Krill hesitated, then offered the truth. They're afraid, but not in the way they used to be. Steele seemed to accept that. Fear isn't always a bad thing, he said. Sometimes it makes people cautious, careful, more deliberate. Do you want them to fear you? Steele took a breath, then let it out. I want them to remember what happens when diplomacy fails, he said. And I want them to work harder to make sure it doesn't. There was a pause. Then Krill asked the question that had been weighing on his mind since the incident. Why didn't you kill them? Daxter, his team, the guards. Steele didn't answer right away. He stared at the simulated stars, eyes distant. Because that's not what diplomats do, he said. Krill studied him for a moment. And yet, you were ready. Every second. Steele looked back at him. I'm always ready. That's the job. That's the deal I made with my government. I walk into the worst rooms. I sit across from the worst people, and I give them a chance to do the right thing. He paused. But I'm also the insurance in case they don't. Krill's mind wandered back to Earth's earliest interactions with the Council tense negotiations, unpredictable behavior, explosive rhetoric. At the time, many considered humanity reckless, emotionally unstable, and too prone to conflict. Now, it was clear those emotions, those messy, unpredictable elements were what made them so effective, so dangerous, and so deeply human. Steele straightened his tie again, the motion now unmistakably tied to readiness, a practiced gesture that said, if I have to, I will. Krill glanced down, then out, toward the endless simulated sky. In my final report, he said, I wrote that humans achieved something unprecedented. Respect not based on fear of their strength, but on fear of their restraint. Steele didn't reply, but the look in his eyes said he appreciated that distinction. It wasn't just about you, Krill added. It was about what your people sent. Steele finally turned to face him fully. I'm not a symbol, he said quietly. I'm not here to inspire awe. But you do. Steele gave a small shrug. That's your problem, not mine. They both chuckled softly. After a long pause, Krill said what they were both thinking. This changes everything. Steele nodded. It's supposed to, and it did. In the weeks and months that followed, things did change. Council chambers across the galaxy were redesigned not to look more imposing, but to remove any illusion of untouchability. Treaty language was revisited, clarified, strengthened. Dozens of dormant negotiations were reopened. Pirate activity dropped significantly in human-patrolled sectors without a single shot fired. Diplomatic missions from Earth suddenly became welcome guests instead of cautious curiosities. More importantly, every race, every single species learned to listen a little closer when a human began to speak. Because behind every calm voice, every handshake, every kind suggestion, there might be a ghost in a black suit. A quiet sentinel watching, waiting, and hoping, truly hoping that things never escalated again, but ready if they did. A lesson beyond the stars later, back aboard his transport, Krill sat alone with his thoughts and his datapad, drafting one final note before his return to Nexia Prime. Not a report, not a communique, a reflection. He titled it simply, What Humanity Taught Us. We once believed strength was measured in fleets, in energy outputs, in genetic resilience and planetary holdings, but strength, it turns out, lives in a quiet human who walks into a room full of enemies and offers peace before pulling a weapon. They do not beg to be heard. They do not demand submission. They simply offer the best version of themselves and prepare for the worst version of everyone else. And in doing so, they teach us that the most dangerous power in the universe isn't brute force. It's mercy backed by unrelenting resolve. And if that's what humans call diplomacy, then perhaps the galaxy needs more of it. Krill closed the file. Somewhere, light years away, Earth continued as it always had, imperfect, driven, flawed. But somewhere in that chaos, people like Marcus Steele trained for wars they hoped never to fight and walked into rooms praying for peace, all while keeping their ghosts behind them, just in case. That was the kind of strength the galaxy had never understood. Until now.